Okay, we'll go ahead and get started now. If you would, everyone join me in welcoming Dr. Don McPherson to Jacksonville. And your family as well. Like I said before, we were trying to keep it to an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours at the most. And we've got 6 really great candidates. We're very excited for our system, and we're just looking for the best fit. So I really appreciate your interest in our system and coming in to interview.
Thank you.
Before we get started, if you'll introduce the board, Ms. Kelly, would you start?
Hello, I'm Kelly Pierce.
Emily Sims.
David Glass.
Steve Smith.
And Mike Poe.
And if you want to kind of kick it off, just give us a little background for education background and your work background.
Sure. Well, my name's Don McPherson, and I will tell you about my family. I have my beautiful wife, Paula. We've been married 21 years. We have a son that is 20, sophomore in college and works. A daughter that's 18 and a half, and she's a freshman. Meredith, that's Rebecca Lilly. Meredith Page is 17 and a half, and she is a junior, or 17. And Hannah Brooks, 15 and a half, and she's a sophomore. My children, my son was an honor graduate in the top 10. My daughter was advanced diploma in the top 10. Meredith Page is on the honors track in second in her class. Hannah Brooks is the honors track and currently in the top 5 of her class. So we take education very seriously as well. I was the first person to graduate in my family in college, of a lot of us. Since then, we had others that have done that. But just to tell you a little bit about me, I was born in Coleman, actually Army Wrestling Hospital in Huntsville, Alabama. And then my father was in the military. We were military brats until I was 5. Then right after my dad got out of the military, he was killed in a car wreck. And so my grandparents raised me, and my sister and me, and they did a wonderful job, and they stressed the importance of education. When I was, we had a farm. We worked very hard. We had thousands of layers of chickens, and we had cattle and hogs and you name it, and soybeans and corn. And when I was 10 years old and 100 degrees in the middle of a soybean patch, I said, I don't want to be a farmer. I want to use my head. So education has always been very important to me. And in high school, we played sports, of course. I was a student body president, salutatorian. And then from there, college, I received a scholarship to Sneed State and Boaz. Went there 1 year, and then 2 years at Auburn University. Graduated in 3 years in mathematics. Then from there, I went to, I knew the governor. The governor at the time was from Coleman County, and I'd never campaigned for him, but I asked him, I went up to him one day, I saw him, I said, could I use you as a reference? And he kind of chuckled, he said, well, how's that going to help you? He said, because at the time, there was a difference in opinions. The first Republican governor in 112 years, and a lot of the other officers were Democratic. I said, well, it may not help me, but it sure will be a good icebreaker. And he said, sure. And about a week later, he called me, and he said, he called me Donnie at the time. And he said, Donnie, he said, I need somebody in my office. Somebody's leaving to work on a campaign. I'd like you to come work for me. And of course, I was right out of college, and I said, I was a DJ at the time, waiting on a teaching job to open up. And the voice of Coleman, WFMH to WFMH-FM, Coleman, Alabama. The time in 10 seconds will be 5:38. So he offered me a position. I said, no, sir, I want to be a teacher. I really appreciate that. I want to work with kids. He goes, well, you'll be working with children. You'll be my youth affairs advisor. You're going to work with the legislature some. I said, no, sir, I just don't think that's wise. I don't think that's a good move for me. Well, I no more got home and said, what were you thinking? When do you get an opportunity to work for the governor of Alabama? Any governor, for that matter. So I called him back. I took the position. I worked there 5 years, and I had the best job in the administration. The job now, it was in his staff at the time. The job now is the commissioner of Children's Affairs. So it's a cabinet-level position now. At the time, it was in the governor's office. And so we handle everything from statewide drug conferences to absence education to international programs. I had the opportunity to meet you. I'll tell you later, I met so many wonderful people. I had the opportunity to meet President Reagan, Dan Quayle, Bush 41, Bill Clinton. So many opportunities for just a young whippersnapper, and had a wonderful opportunity and enjoyed it tremendously. During that time, I was working on my master's at Auburn University in Montgomery. I got that in mathematics education. And after the administration ended, I was looking for a job, and someone came up to me and said, "Hey, I would like for you to work with me. You work with my son on an international exchange program. I'd like for you I'm starting a new division in mobile oil." And I was like, "I'm going back into education. I don't want to do that." And I said, "Well, how much does it pay?" And we told me. I said, "When do I start?" So for 4 years, I worked for Mobile Oil, and I worked in the Midwest and the Southeast with Mobile. We sold to fleets and to truck dealerships, oil additives, and that's where I got my business perspective inside because there is a business side to education. There's one side that you deal with students, but there's also a business side, which is called return on investment. So we did that for 4 years, and then as I was further and further away from my family, so we went back and we started teaching math and coaching. And then from there, we had an opportunity to move into an administrative position, elementary administrator. And then from there, we went into oversaw a program at the central office, $750,000 grant from the federal government on after-school and summer programs, ministered that for 2 years. And then the federal programs director job opened up in Coleman, so I took that position for 8 years. And then the past 4.5 years, I've been the superintendent in Coffee County. So we moved south to get experience, and then hopefully move north back. So that's kind of the background there. In the interim, I got my master's at Auburn University Montgomery, my EDS at UAB, my doctor of philosophy from joint program between the University of Alabama and the University of Alabama at Birmingham. I also have taught at Athens University. I've taught undergraduate students, most of those 3rd and 4th year students. And then I've also taught for UAB at the master's level and the EDS level on education finance. So that's kind of my background as far as teaching and work ethic and things like that. So hope that helps.
That's very good. Thank you very much. We'll move now into our 20 questions. It'll rotate through the board members, and each person will get a chance to ask a question. We'll start off with number 1 with Steve.
As superintendent of a school system, a large portion of the day is devoted to making numerous decisions that involve multiple stakeholders. Describe your decision-making style and provide a few examples of strategies you've used in different situations with various stakeholders.
Okay. Well, the first answer would be collaborative. It is amazing what you can learn by listening. Now, if I have the pleasure to be the superintendent, I'll have the authority as being the superintendent. But in order to be successful, you have to give up some of that power to be able to ask people questions. What do you think? What's your opinion? What can you bring to this to the table here? I'm a big proponent on committees. Now, obviously, sometimes you can't, there are certain situations come up, and I think there's another question I'll answer at that specific side. But as far as parent advisory committees, anytime we've had a situation come up, you bring your parents in, you ask them, and believe me, if you ask them, guess what? They will tell you. And then, of course, obviously, you're trying to fit a best fit line because everybody has different opinions. Sometimes it's almost like the shotgun approach, that your shotgun shell is splattered everywhere, and you're trying to fit that best line to move your system forward. But the committee standpoint is excellent from a parent advisory committee. I'm big on the leadership committees at the schools, at the elementary and the secondary level, because they're going to be your driving force when you implement any particular initiative that you create or an initiative that the State Department mandates. So you have to have a group of individuals together, working together, and say, how does this best fit? How can we make this successful? How are we going to accomplish what is needed to accomplish? Also, there's system level, where you look at the system as a whole, and there's several questions that I'll maybe address that a little bit further. And then finally, a student advisory committee, because I have found that my children, of course, they haven't been able to be on student advisory committees because they were related to the superintendent. But the student advisory committees, you ask them and they will tell you. We have ideas, well, we need to do this for the kids. We need to do that for the kids. You hear that all the time as board members. I hear it all the time as a superintendent. But if you ask a student, and a prime example would be, we were trying to do some practice facility, and the students we asked the student advisory committee, and they said, Dr. Mack, because it's easier to say Dr. Mack than McPherson. So, Dr. Mack, I said, what you got? He goes, You know what we need? We need updated dressing rooms. Well, I don't go in dressing rooms. You don't go in dressing rooms. Parents don't go in dressing rooms. But who goes in the dressing room all the time? These student athletes. You go in the dressing room and go, you're right. We need to address that. So by asking them, they will tell you. And then, of course, another example is when we were trying to, with our child nutrition program, we were trying to increase breakfast offerings. We would have good breakfasts. I'd go in and it'd be delicious breakfast. We couldn't get a lot of participation. So we said, what can we do to get you to eat? Well, that's our social time at 7:15 or 7:30. We want to talk. I said, well, what can we do to get you to eat? Well, what about if you bring it in the classroom? Well, we added 5 minutes to first period at one of the schools. They brought the breakfast in. It condensed, of course, and it increased our participation. We asked them, just simply asked them. And there's other examples as well, like food. You know, we ask them, what do you like? And of course, you know, resoundingly, we want hot wings. And we had to bring in a C&P person to explain that, okay, now it's the hot wings, you can't have that many now. You can't have 8 or 9 like you go somewhere else. You're going to have 4, but you can buy extra. And so we added that, and they devoured it. And then what was near and dear to my heart, it hurt when they said they wanted less meatloaf. I'm a big meatloaf person, but guess what? We listened to them, and we cut the meatloaf, and it increased that too. So those are, I'm collaborative, and those are some specific examples that I would use. But I'm very big on committees because it involves people. 2, people, they understand where you're going with that particular program or that vision, and then if they help you implement it, it will be successful.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any follow-up to number 1? All right, number 2, Mike?
Explain how you would develop a school system budget and tell us who you would involve and how you would involve them. And as a follow-up, how would you prioritize cuts to the budget if it was necessary?
Well, again, I'll state the obvious, collaborative. You work collaborative with several groups. The young lady back there, I would be working with her extensively, our CSFO, because she knows where the numbers are. If she's been here long enough, her counterpart used to be in Coleman County. He was been there 30 years before he left. I said he not only knows where the bodies are, but why they're buried. You know, have we gone that path before? You know, how can we fund that? Have we funded this before? There's a lot of things you can ask from the experience side that will help tremendously. But anything, you're given money from the state, you're given teacher units, you're given classroom instructional support units, and you sit down with your leadership team at the central office and your leadership teams at the schools, including your administrators, and you ask, okay, what is it, here's what we have. What did we have last year? This is what we project. And do we have enough to cover what we've done in the past? But also when I bring up the ROI, the return on investment, is you have to look and see what you did last year, was it successful? For example, if you had an overload in class size and you say, we need a local unit to ease this class size. More times than not, if it's a kindergarten unit, you're going to get that money back the next year in the foundation program. So in the next year, you'll have that extra unit. And that's where you'll have to look at your enrollment, your projected enrollment. Do we put that person back in kindergarten, or move them up to first grade? Because if it's a large group, we may need to move them that way. But you involve multiple people, multiple groups, and you go down the list. Everything from how much do we pay for heating and cooling, how many teachers do we have, how much capital outlay do we have in the past? Are we projecting this year? As you're building your new school, there may be something else that runs into that costs that. You may set aside additional monies for that in order to prepare that. And if you have an overflow, then you can obviously pay that down to debt. You can put it to your monthly reserve. As far as your question regarding cuts, no one likes those. And hopefully with the Rolling Reserve Act that's been passed several years ago by the legislature, which I think was one of the best things, it kind of put us on a 15-year average budget. That will help us. So hopefully we will not have those cuts unless there is a recession of all recessions. But when you ask those questions, you bring people together. Because the first thing you do is you do not want to see on TV, or you don't want to read in the paper that your program or that your child's a part of or that your group deals with is on the chopping block. You bring them in, you explain it, you find out, and again, you ask people, if we have to cut something, what do we cut first? And you're going to get varying opinions, and you have to work that. That's a landmine. That's a landmine area. But you work with those, and usually, you know, and I love field trips. You can do virtual field trips. You know, you can do those online. You can combine programs, like if you're traveling, boys and girls, and say, we work with the schedule, and we play baseball and softball, play the same team, and so we could use the same bus, you know, to go. So those are some, you know, shorter examples. But if you're talking bigger issues, you involve a lot of people in order to find out what would be best.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any follow-up to number 2? All right, Ms. Kelly, number 3.
What experience do you have with incorporating technology with teaching and learning, such as our One to World initiative?
Okay. A great deal of experience with technology and in the classroom. As I was saying, I was federal programs director for 8 years for a large system. And so at that time, any of the monies that we had for technology came from the federal dollars. So we tried to incorporate that. If you look at technology is kind of like, I would use the example of an iceberg. I would use the analogy of an iceberg. The only thing you see is from the water line up. And what that means is that's what you're tangibly touching or tangibly see. The laptop, the iPad, whatever the case may be. From everything down below is how it mushrooms out, how it gets bigger underneath. And that's, of course, you know, the support. If it doesn't matter what you do, if you can't support it, it's not going to work well. When I came to Coffee County, I asked, tell me about technology, and they had Cat 5, and they didn't even know what an access point was. And so I said, well, who's our people we work with? You're going to love this. They said, well, we got one person that works on Tuesdays part-time and one person that works on Thursdays part-time. Okay, I said, what's their names? Honest to goodness, Bo and Luke were their names. And I was like, what have I got myself into? But they were some of the most smartest people you'll ever run across. And they were very, very intelligent, and as you work with them, and we worked together. So we went in, we added the Cat 6, we added the access points, we increased the bandwidth. We had all that prepared. We added the personnel we needed. We made them more than part-time. And then, of course, we were at the beta testing level when we were deciding, you know, whether it be iPads at the lower grades and, you know, laptops at the upper grades. So we were at that particular point. But you asked the second part of how is it effective. You do two things. You look at it formatively, what you see, what you observe, and then summative. You know, what is our end result? What do we want? Obviously, you want student engagement. That's one of the first things. If you're dealing with something like this, you want student engagement in the classroom. But also, you want them to be able to take what they're doing and move it to the next level. So again, you ask people. You look at your test scores, and then when you get that particular test score, what does that tell us? What does that really mean? But one of the biggest things I would do, and it's formative, but it's also can be summative, is that you ask people who have graduated, that are in college using the technology, and you say, okay, when you went to Jacksonville, did this help prepare you for college? And then you ask those students that maybe weren't college, they were just career-minded, and say, okay, did this help you in your job that you have now? And that's the way you can determine the effectiveness of it, along with you can look at your data as well. Hope that answers your question.
It does, and there's a second part, you kind of answered it, but I want to make sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Just, you know, to be consistent and repeat it every time.
Yes, ma'am.
How would you annually evaluate the effectiveness of teaching and learning with technology?
Well, again, we would look at the data. You would predetermine ahead of time, this is what we hope to achieve. And then as you measure that, and of course, obviously, you can measure it with ACT. Did our ACT scores improve? Did our, the whole bed of the ACT Aspire, in grades 3 through 8, did we go in a positive direction there? Also the grades, whether it be 9-week or semester, things like that. And again, student engagement, you're doing observations, the formative side. Are students engaged? But not only are they engaged, what are they doing? What are they doing? And what are they creating? Are they doing small group work? Are they creating projects? Are they doing service learning projects with this? all these things added together, your formative side and your summative side, we put together, okay, what's our next step? Do we need to increase funding? Do we need to take a different path? Do we need to limit it? Do we need to expand it?
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I had a follow-up on that. It sounded like you were at the point where you were getting ready to pick your devices or what.
Yes, sir.
How important is the device in your overall scheme of technology for education? You
Well, yeah, I think it's important, obviously, because that's what they're going to be using.
think? The type of device.
The type of device.
Right.
Well, we looked at, and again, everybody's different. So we looked at more of the iPads from the standpoint of the younger ones because it was more just easily accessible in K2. We were looking at more of the actual laptops in the upper grades from 3 on up. But again, that does, just because we were looking at it the way doesn't mean that
Sure.
what you're doing is not the correct way. And if I'm your superintendent, that's what I would do. I'd come in and you evaluate everything yearly. How are we doing this? Not just this year, but we've got to look at several years down the road. And what we were doing is we were going to take it at one grade at a time. Here's one grade, and then here's the middle school, then here's one whole high school, and then do the same in the elementary, work all the kinks out at one school. Now, that might upset a couple of the other schools, but we were very spread out and diverse because you're dealing with bandwidth over a lot of areas and some different types of technology, and then make it successful. Because again, if it's not successful, it's a paperweight. It's a paperweight.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other follow-up?
I got 2 questions on this one, 2 follow-up questions. One of them you mentioned about graduates, asking graduates.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you reach out to them? How do you contact them once they've left the system?
Well, most of the time, the counselors will have an idea of where they went, and even though Jacksonville's not, you're a 4A school, most people know, they're gonna have an idea of where Bob or Sue or Fred, where they went to college like that, and then by email, Facebook, Twitter, there's several ways that you can reach out to them. Now, whether you get them or not, that I don't know. Homecomings, that's another way. When they come back for homecoming, we've had a lot of success there. Sign up, where are you now? And you can sign up and get your current information, and you can pull from that. And then also the parents. The parents are going to keep up with them. So you can contact the parents and say, we want to ask you, every time I've called a parent and say, we'd like to ask your graduate a question about the success at this particular school, I've never had a problem in getting in touch with them. They're very, hey, let me get you that information. That's an excellent question.
Okay.
What's
So
your next one?
what do you do with the information that you receive from the graduates? Is it you helping that to inform instruction within the classroom or
Right. Yes,
drive
ma'am.
programs?
Yeah. What did Miss Jones do that made the difference? What does Mr. Smith need to improve on? Well, we get him off task when we start talking about World War II. Those are things that you can say, and then you come back in and as for professional development, here's how I can improve. And then you can also work with those teachers to help other teachers improve as well. But like anything, in some cases, sometimes it's just affirmation. We're on task. We are doing what we're supposed to be doing. And in some cases, we've got some room to improve on.
Okay, and then a follow-up on the technology part about evaluating that. So, you talked about receiving hard data on the student performance. How is it that you assess that it's the technology that led to the improvement in student achievement?
Yeah. And it can be ambiguous because there can be several factors of that. One, of course, on student engagement, did our graduation rate increase? Obviously, there could be several factors on that. Student engagement, again, that would be formative. As you walk in, are people engaged? And are they engaged, but what are they doing? And then, of course, as I said, also, culmination of class projects, culmination of service learning projects, things of that nature, in order to see is that the avenue we need to go. And again, you do have surveys to ask students. Does this help you? Does this help you? But yeah, you're right. It's very ambiguous. From that standpoint, those are just certain factors you have to look up and you have to make determinations about because there's not one particular catch-all for technology.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Next question?
Any other
Okay, I
follow-up?
have the
Jenny,
next
you're up.
question.
All right, next question.
Superintendents understand at the end of the day, student growth and achievement is ultimately what matters. Describe your experience in developing, implementing, and evaluating curriculum and instructional programs to raise student achievement.
Okay. Well, first off, it's an Army saying, but it's 7 P's success. I'll use the 6. Prior, proper preparation prevents poor performance. And what I mean by that is it's all about the planning. That is one of the most crucial aspects of when you're dealing with curriculum, is planning for success. Now, as you plan for success, you, as I mentioned earlier with a different question, you're bringing in your leadership teams, and you're looking at, again, the data from last year, both formative and summative, and as you plan for that next year, how can we be effective and how can we be more effective? Then as you plan that, then you bring in your leadership teams and you bring in your faculty and staff and say, this is our this is our plan, this is our idea. Tell me what you think about it. You know, how does this affect you in your particular classroom? You know, how will you work with this particular situation? And as you move along, then you can see quickly, okay, we need to plan for professional development. Professional development, for it to be successful, has to be sustained and ongoing. Because I have to be reminded constantly to take the garbage out every so often, okay? Every so often, honey, take the garbage out. Honey, I have to be reminded. Well, sometimes teachers are like that as well. You know, as you go in and you observe them and you say, okay, here's something that we see that we can help you. And then sometimes it's the fact that they just maybe don't understand the concept fully. I know you've not had any comments at all regarding college and career standards, have you? There's been no comments at all. No one said one word about it, right? Sure they have. A lot of people said a lot of things about it. And one of the things that we found out was not that there was anything technically wrong with the college career standards, is that some of the teachers didn't understand it. Whereas in the past it was very wide and not very deep. Here, as they've moved things around and situated it such in particular, in those particular vertical lines, so now you can go, it's not as wide, but it's deeper. It goes into deeper content. So a deeper, hopefully, sense of understanding. So as you do that, then of course the teachers need that professional development along the way to say, okay, and a teacher, they want, I've seen very few educators in my life that didn't truly care about kids and didn't want to be successful. Sometimes they didn't know how to be. And so in that regards, you help them. You know, how can I help you be a better teacher? How can I help you be a stronger teacher? How can I help you understand this particular concept? And then, of course, from there, as you develop it, as you go along the school year, you will make corrections if needed. You know, we're going well here, we need to work here, because every person's different. We have to look, whether it be for teachers or for students, it has to be more and more personalized. It has to be. That's the only way you're truly going to be successful. I do not want Dr. Smith, Mr. Smith's wife, to come in, I don't know what kind of doctor she is, and prescribe the same medication, the same treatment as the last 10. I hope that we may all have the same thing, I don't know, but most time we don't. This is exactly the same way it should be in education, whether it be teachers, everyone should be on a learning track. Everyone should be, whether it be teachers, whether it be students. You do it with athletes. You don't put your football players on linebacker drills, do you? Unless they're a linebacker too. But in most cases they're not. So you individualize that and you work with those teachers to improve, and you help those students that need that additional help. And then always, as you're constantly looking, trying to prove, at the end of the year, you evaluate. Where are we? Did we get where we wanted to go? And if we didn't, what was the cause? And there could be several things that you say, well, I think it could be this, I think it could be that. And then you go back to that same do loop. Let's do it again. Now, some of the problems with education is that a lot of times we don't get our data until we've already hired teachers. So you have to make some projections. And then along the way, you can correct those projections. Just like class, kindergarten. You say we have so many pre-registered, and then boom, it's, what happened 5 years ago? Was there a blackout 5 years ago? There's a bumper crop, so to speak. So you have to look at that and sometimes make those adjustments. But again, on the way, planning is crucial, and then along the way, you look at how everyone's doing. Are we moving forward? Are we following the plan? And then finally, you evaluate it constantly in order to improve.
The second part of this question, you might want to add to this. I think you've already addressed some of it. In what ways do you involve faculty and staff in carrying out this process?
Right, and you go back to the leadership teams. The leadership teams get with it first, from the central office, to your leadership teams to your school, the leadership teams to the teachers. Because everyone wants to know, how does it affect me? if there's a law change, how does it affect me? The same exact way. How, if you want me to teach it this way, or you want me to work with this initiative, or we're pushing this program, how can I work with this program to be successful, not only for myself, personal being, but for most importantly for the students.
Okay, any follow-up to number 4? All right, move on to number 5. That's mine. Do you believe that extracurricular involvement leads to better academic performance and student motivation? If so, how would you evaluate extracurricular offerings and fund them?
Yes.
Okay, good answer. Number 6.
Okay. There was a book that I one of my graduate studies, and again, when you're doing graduate work and you're working, there's a lot of times you're trying to get what you need to get and move on. But the book was a very interesting book, and I actually did read it. It was called The High School Shopping Mall. And what it was a book that kind of discussed and talked about how that we'll take the Galleria in Hoover, south of Birmingham, that a lot of people will go into the Macy's, a majority of people go into Macy's, or they'll go into Sears, or they'll go into Belk, or they'll go into Dillard's. Majority of people will. But then there's these special boutiques. My daughter that's not here loves Hot Topic. Okay, we get sucked into Hot Topic all the time. Okay, but that's her niche. That's the kind of the way she likes to dress. She likes it when it rains. I mean, now she's not a goth, so don't panic or anything. She's in college, so it wouldn't matter anyway. But there's other people that like Rue 21. There's other people that like another type of store. But as you look at this, you kind of treat it that way. What niche can we work? Because a lot of students, they're not, when you call them, Dr. Sims, and ask them a question, they're not going to remember the Pythagorean theorem. They're not necessarily going to remember how to derive the quadratic equation. I would be hurt because I'm a math teacher. I wish they would. But how did it make them feel? But 2, also, what did they participate in? That's some of the things they're going to take back from school. And there's so many students that you have to hook them. In class, when I would teach math and we would get to a particular subject, to get their attention, I would walk in on a particular day, and I'd walk in and I'd look outside. I'd be real, boisterous and kind of say, okay, now I want y'all to be quiet. And I'd walk out, head out, and I'd shut the door, and I'd be real, deliberate. And I'd say, listen, we're going to talk about the F word today. I mean, I had their attention, they were up, and I said, we're going to talk about fractions, and that's a dirty word for some of y'all. But it hooked them. But what it did is it got them involved. It got them, minds thinking. Well, and with school, extracurricular activities is so important because it helps them become a part of something. That they feel like there's ownership there. They feel like they're a part. I go to Jacksonville. What are you in? Well, I'm in choir. I'm in the band. I'm in soccer. I'm in softball. I'm in volleyball. I'm in football, whatever. And that's one of the first things they'll tell you because they're proud of that. They're proud to be a part of that. And it's not just academics. It's not just athletics, academics, and Scholars Bowl, math team, all the different, science programs, your robotics program, anything that you do, your STEM activity, all of these things, everyone has a niche and everyone has something that they really enjoy. There's things we like to do. There's things students like to do. So as you get them, that high school shopping mall kind of designed these little boutique areas for the person that likes this or likes that. And then there's some people that like the meat and potatoes. They like the Dillards. They like the Macy's. They like that. And as it all comes together, that helps design the whole school environment and experience. Okay? Now, as far as how you evaluate those things, just like with sports, as well as academic activities, so many things help prepare you for life. Because in sports, as well as academics, I was in math team Scholars Bowl. I was also I played high school sports. You had to practice. You had to put forth the time and effort. You had to categorize your time. You had to sit there and make sure that you not only did what you're practicing, but then you also had to do your other work, and then you had maybe a part-time job. You had to categorize and prioritize. And then you had to come in contact with people that, guess what, you may not like. They may not like you. They may say things that you don't hear or you don't like to. Maybe you go to church and they don't. Maybe they go to church and you don't. But public education is so important because it helps preparing you for that game called life, because you're going to work with people you don't like. And these particular, whether it be athletic, academic, clubs, activities, all kind of help bond you. You build that ownership, and it helps carry you past that walking across that graduation stage. Now, how you evaluate that, again, it goes back again to my formative, my summative. Again, sometimes those are hard to determine. I mean, again, how much is your enrollment? How many people are interested? What are the activities? Some activities across country is not very cost. It doesn't cost that much money. You go out and run in a field. You go out and run in some woods. You get into other activities, and it can be quite expensive. But is it worth the cost? And that's where you go back and you ask stakeholders. You ask those students. You ask those parents. And then you have to prioritize. Hopefully, we can have as many activities as we possibly can. Where we've had problems in the past is sometimes we like to do extra activities. Sometimes we simply don't have the personnel. I mean, there's just sometimes not enough personnel to be a sponsor of something. But as much as we can, we try to make those offerings, again, to make that person not only want to be in school, but enjoy it.
Thank you. Any follow-up to that? Okay, Mike, you got number 6.
As superintendent, how would you measure the progress or success of our school system from year to year, and how would you share this information?
Well, again, you would go, I'm going to say it over and again, there's formative assessment where stuff that you see, classroom observations, watching ball games, whatever you're doing, how do people feel? Are they enjoying it? Are they not enjoying it? Also, though, as you look at your data, how do we stack up, as someone mentioned earlier, how do we stack up with everyone else, in comparison? And you say, well, we didn't do as well as this system, okay? Do they have the same demographics we have? Are you comparing apples to apples? You make sure you're comparing that, and you rank them, and of course, and you say, is this where where we want to be? You ask that question every year. Is this where we want to be? Is this where, are we happy with this? And if we're not, how close are we? How close are we? Do we need just a little bit of improvement? Do we need a lot of improvement? And if it's a lot of improvement, do we need to make some changes? And that's those are some of those tough decisions that you as a board and as a superintendent, I have to recommend sometimes that happens. But as far as how you get it out to the public, to almost everybody you can. I mean, whether it be, I'm a big proponent of the state of the system address each year, not only to the board, but also to, again, my parent advisory committee, your student advisory committee. When teachers come back and staff come back from schools, you portray, here's how we did. Here's how we did positive, we did negative, here's where we can improve on, here's some areas we need to improve on. You also, if you have an opportunity to speak before civic clubs, the opportunity, again, invite the city council, go to a city council meeting, present that to them, let them know, because they need to be an active part of this school system for the continued and long-term success of Jacksonville. Your city council has to be an integral part. They have to feel a part of this as well. And of course, and then again, internet, Twitter, Facebook, we can rent a billboard or get a free billboard, put something up there. And you talk about those positives. And again, it doesn't matter how much you do, how much you give, there's going to be somebody who's like, I didn't know that. And then as you went with us today, Mr. Poe, give the board talking points, because I use it when I ask an example about people come up and will say, well, what about this or what about that? I always want to give you something positive to talk about. If somebody ever asks you, where do you go to church or what's your religion? They either want a 30-second answer or a 30-minute answer. Most of them want a 30-second answer. So you want to give them, here's some of the things we've done positive this year. They want the 30-minute answer, then you bring them in and we sit down and talk to them. But most of the time, they want some talking points in order for you to say, well, we have an issue with this, but here are the positives of what we have done this year. And again, positive communication is the best way. Someone asks me, says, how you doing? I'm having a great day. I have a great day every single day, because if your superintendent does not have a great day, who will? If I don't have that positive persona, if I don't think that every day is going to be great and we're going to make positive strides every day, who will? Because Mr. Edwin Cooley was my first, when I taught at AREB, Mr. Cooley was my first superintendent. And he told this, and I've told this every year to new teachers. He said, on your worst day, I mean, for women, you just got a perm and it was pouring down rain, your car died, or you got to change your tire, or you fell in a mud puddle, or whatever, you run in your pantyhose, or you tore your shirt, whatever. On your worst possible day, as an educator, you will still be the most positive influence in several of these children's lives. So if I'm not positive, it has to start with me. Who will be positive? And then you as a board being positive, saying, here's the positive attributes of Jacksonville City. Here's what we've accomplished last year. And again, there's times when we need to say, well, we made a mistake there, but we're going to improve on it, and this is how we're going to improve on it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any follow-up on that? Okay, move on to number 7. Kelly?
What is your approach to discipline, and how would you ensure that students have a safe, secure, and orderly environment for learning and for participating in extracurricular activities?
Yes, ma'am. Well, I'm a firm but fair when it comes to discipline. The punishment should fit the crime. I mean, if there's an offense, okay, I'm assuming we have board policies, and we have a student handbook, and we have here, if you do this right here, here's this right here. Cut and dry. When I became superintendent, I had every one of those teachers, and I told them, I says, I do not care if one of my children breaks the rules. You punish them just like it was anybody else's kid. But by the same token, because it happens to be my child, don't dish them either, because they're the superintendent's kids. So you treat everyone just like you would treat your own. And if you do that, and you follow these guidelines, you're not going to have an issue. Here's what it is. Here's where we go with this. Here's where we move on with that. Now, as always, you're going to also always look at your data. With your student incident report, your SIR data. Okay, how many people did this? How many people did that? What was the punishment here? What was the punishment there? And you constantly evaluate that. And you look and say, okay, are we treating everybody fair? Are there issues? If there is, let's look at that. We'll make sure that we want to treat everybody. We want to have blinders on, and we want to be colorblind. And it doesn't matter who their mama is or who their daddy is. My son got a paddling. Well, guess what? He deserved it. He also got one when he got home, too. I used my own Board of Education. So I want you to treat my child just like you would any other child. And I expect that from the administrators. I expect that from teachers. I expect that from staff. If your child, Mr. Poe, messes up, we're going to look just exactly like it is anybody else. I don't think you'd want anything different. I hope you would. But also, too, the next thing, though, I'd like to talk about when you say that, I want to add a little bit to that, is that first and foremost, for teaching, for anything to happen in the schools, you first have to have, as you mentioned in your question, teachers and students and parents have to feel safe. So the very first thing is you have to ensure that your school system and schools are safe. Now with that, they have to be clean. Okay? They have to be clean. And one of the things that we do each year is I form a committee, and I bring in administrators, I bring teachers, I bring in parents, I bring students. And at the start of the summer, we go and look at every school on our campus, central office, the schools, everything, and we go in and out, classrooms, hallways, bathrooms, and I said, what do you see? What do you, because we see it every day. We go by that every day. There's a crack right there. We need to fill in that crack. It's nothing for me, but if you got a child that's in a walker or a wheelchair, a 2-inch crack, that could be an issue. Or we need to spruce up with some little things, the shrubs or the little things that didn't cost that much money. We need paint here. We need to fix this particular screw. We need to work on this bathroom stall. You bring these people in, and they look at it from a different viewpoint. So the very first thing you have to have is safe. And thank goodness you've got resource officers. That's a tremendous advantage. But you have to have. I know you're looking for the new school. The old school has has so many access points. I mean, There's just so many access points, as this will be much more limited at your new school as well as here at the high school. So safe and secure is the very first thing. That's your first level. That's your foundation. And then when that's the case, then you have to have discipline. You have to follow those rules, and you have to be firm but fair. And then after that layer is solidified, then you can address the teaching. The teaching is, it's not, did I teach? I taught it. They should know. Did you go in a different way? I had a teacher one time that gave 100 questions on a math test, the multiplication. The child missed 48. They don't do them 10 times each. And I said, do you think that's helping that kid? I didn't get a Christmas present, by the way, from my teacher. But what I'm trying to say, though, is that we got to look at a different way to explain multiplication to this particular child. And if we don't do that, you're just digging the child a bigger hole. So it's not just did I teach it, how did I teach it? How can I approach a different way? Getting back to that personalized instruction. And then as you get that teaching aspect down, then and only then, and it still might not happen, then and only then can learning occur. And each one is predicated on each particular base being in place. Safety and security, cleanliness, discipline, teaching, and then finally learning.
Okay, can you follow it? All right, number 8. Would you recommend implementing a program that you strongly feel would benefit students, even if funding the program would require dipping into local fund reserves?
Well, first off, it would be if and only if I truly believed in it. If I truly thought this would make a difference. And so if I, first off, truly thought that would make a difference. The second thing is how does it benefit the students? It goes back to that return on investment. Okay, it may be a great program, but if it only affects a small portion of your population and it only affects it to a certain degree, is that worth it? But if I truly believed in it, 2, I truly believe that it would affect a large number of students, and then finally, if I built consensus for us, because it doesn't matter what I think. I've got the teachers are the ones on the front lines. They're the ones that have to say, hey, this is working, this is not working. And if they have consensus and they believe in it, then yes, I would bring it to the board, but only in those 3 particular categories.
Second part to that was, what level of reserve funds do you think a system should seek to maintain as a floor?
When I left as federal program director in Coleman County, we had 4 days operating reserve. It started way back in '95 when they changed the foundation program. Back when years ago, you would have, if you paid for the teacher, the state paid for the benefits. And so we had several units, and we just kept on, and it was elected superintendent. And I didn't want to be a superintendent there. No offense, Mr. Neighbors. But so as you do that, well, we got to have local units. We got to have, and I understand you got to have local units, but we had 40. And every year it got worse and worse and worse, and proration. When I left, they had 4 days. When I went to Coffee County, we had 6 months. We added up to 8.5 months, and I did that on purpose because we started paying $1.8 million and $500,000 buildings out of our reserve. So when I left, I got there, we had 6 months, and when I left, I think we had about 6.3, 6.4. So it's important to have a reserve, but also, what are you going to do with it? Obviously, you want to prepare in case there's an emergency. God forbid the word mold comes up. You know what I'm saying? But you can close a school if there's a mold issue. So you need to have a set aside, or if there's a flood or something like that. Yes, you have insurance, and yes, you'll eventually get a lot of it back. But then, in the meantime, you have to have outlay. So most cases, I would say 2 to 3 months. But now again, my board wanted a hefty reserve, so that's what they had asked me to do, and I kept it there. But I would think a 2 to 3 month range would be a fair. 2 to 4 would be, to me, the max I think you would want to have.
Okay, thank you. I had a follow-up. I couldn't really figure out where to put it in, but I noticed in your application there was you had done I think you purchased school buses. Did you convert a program from that was already using their own school buses, or you had? Did you guys sub out your school buses, or did you own them?
We owned them.
Okay, you
Yes,
always
sir,
owned
and
them.
when they came in, they were several years old, and we were not getting any of the money that's allotted to the state for that 10-year window. And so when I approached the state, I said, we have money in reserves. I said, we're spending, when we did the analysis, we were spending more money with mechanic fees and parts and time away than when we figured it up, we were saving money to buy a new bus. I mean, you know, cost effective with the allocation from the state. So within my 4.5 years there, we completely are all in that 10-year window there, and they all have air conditioning, and very, very, very nice. And we've tried our very best to, because what does everybody see? A school bus. They may not come to school, they might not come to a school function, but everybody sees a school bus.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And I'm sorry, I didn't catch the number of months reserved that you had at the most in Coffee County.
Yeah, I got it up to about 8.5. I think 6.3 was what I
Months?
think. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Mhm.
Thank you.
Now that would be, you know, every system's different. You know what their monthly reserve is. I mean, they may have X million dollars, but depending on what your monthly amount is, times that number.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Emily, number 9.
How would you evaluate the effectiveness of teachers and administrators? And describe your experience you have with an ineffective teacher or administrator, and tell us how you resolve that issue.
Okay. Well, first off, I'm very visible. I'm a very visible superintendent. I'm a proponent of working with that principal. I like to go on walkthroughs. Most time I go with a group, and we go in and we look for specific things. But I'm very think you need to do classroom observations. You need to see what's going on in that particular classroom. And as you work with your leadership teams, you work with those instructional coaches, you look and you see what it is actually happening. So as you see those things, again, when you look at a teacher that may have an issue, you ask some questions. What kind of rapport do they have with their students? How's their discipline in the classroom? And here's a question: do they like? I know this sounds crazy, but do they like kids? I mean, I've seen a handful of teachers that just didn't like kids, and so you know, and then do they want to improve? You know, a lot of people, I want to improve, but then they don't make those needed changes in order to improve. And then, of course, finally, you know, do the students like them? I don't really care if they like them. I always tell teachers, do they respect you enough 10 or 20 years from now to invite you to their reunion? That lets you know whether or not you've made the cut, so to speak. And you don't get that accolades at the moment, because as a teacher and as a coach and as an administrator and maybe as a superintendent, I've been called a couple of words before. You know, PhD can stand for other things. I can promise you. But you do that in order to benefit those children. And it's exactly the same way, you know, that's the formative side. The summative side, of course, is you look at your grades, how are they doing, how are your test scores, and you look and say, ask that question, okay, why was the test score this? Tell me what you think about that, and what is it you're trying to accomplish here? And I've seen so many times as you work with these students, these teachers on professional development, and it's the same with coaches. Same with coaches. You ask them some of those same things. Coaching is a little more different because, you know, with coaching or a particular situation, you know, how many games they win. Unfortunately, that's part of it. But also is how do they carry themselves? You know, are you improving? Well, we only won 2 games last year. Well, that's not good. We didn't win any the year before. Well, that's not bad, you know. So you look at that, where you're at in that particular section. But again, I go back to my 2 standpoints. You look at the formative side, what you can see and what you can touch, and then you look at the summative side, what's the end result? Where are we, and how we need to move forward? I've seen, and if there is an issue, I'm a proponent of working with progressive discipline. Because let's say teachers make mistakes. I make mistakes. If you don't think I make mistakes, you can ask my wife afterwards. She'll tell you I make mistakes. And if not, she reminds me. But what I mean by that is that we'll make a mistake from time to time. Okay, we made a mistake. Now, how can we correct it? How can we improve on it? But if we continue to make those mistakes, then we move that ladder up. And then, of course, at the end, then you have to make some tough decisions on what, what the next levels are. And sometimes those aren't very nice, but that's a part of life, So that's how I would kind of do that. As far as administrators go, the same exact way. I've had a situation where an administrator has done something they shouldn't do. I discuss it with them, explain it to them. If it's not egregious, that's all we do. If it happens again, then I've written them up before. If it happens again, I'm telling them they need to find another place to live. They need to find another place to go. But in most cases, one time, most people want to please you. Most people want to do everything in their power to get better. So very few times I've ever had to write somebody up. Once you talk to them, explain to them what it is you need and how you need to improve, most of the time they're very eager to try to do that, in most cases.
Any follow-up? Number 10, Steve.
Describe your management style and what methods you've found to be most effective in supervision and building rapport with administrators and employees.
Sure. Well, first off, I would describe it as situational because it depends. For example, if it's an emergency, then I'm very directive. We're going to do this. We're going to close school at 2 o'clock because we have got a bad weather coming. I'm not going to form a committee. I'll contact EMA and I'll be in contact with the local authorities and I'll talk to some other surrounding systems, but I'm not going to form a committee to discuss it. Okay, we got bad weather coming. We're shutting the doors. Come get your kids. We're going to carry them home. But also, again, just as I said about personalized, every person is at a different level. So I can take a 30-year veteran that is a master teacher and say, I need some help with this. What do you think about that? And we can have an open dialogue, and he or she can give me some great ideas and say, hey, I could really look at maybe making that change, and I think I can handle that. There's some new teachers, you may be more directive. Okay, we're having an issue with discipline in your classroom. This is how I want you to handle this. Okay? But if they're a seasoned person, okay, what are the problems you're having? Ask them, how do you think you can, follow through? How can you do that? So it's situational because it depends on the particular person and on the particular topic. Most time, again, I'm more participative or collaborative, democratic. What's your idea? How can we move forward with this? That's my main one. But again, in certain instances, depending on the individual, that's why I would say, hey, this is how to handle this, this is handle this. And again, depending on the situation, is how you, again, situational would be to handling. But it would be personalized as it best can be. You want to be democratic as far as a group, but when you get to individual people, you handle them differently. Some people, you can just talk to them. I've got 4 children. I'm not going to name who because they'll get mad afterwards. Daddy, you shouldn't have brought my name up. But, I can just say, one of them I'd have to use the Board of Education on. One of them I could just do the keys. One of them I could say, hand me the phone. And one of them would say, Emily, I'm so disappointed in you. And she'd fall apart. So you handle each, just like you would your own child, you handle each teacher or each administrator the same way with their strengths and weaknesses and say, because everybody wants the best for kids. I've seen very few people in life that didn't. And how do you reach that particular teacher or that particular person to get the most out of them, what's best for those students?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any follow-up?
I was going to ask just some examples. What are some ways that you develop rapport with faculty and administrators?
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, again, when you work with them, and again, I go back to my leadership teams, you ask them, okay, here's our situation. How do you think is the best way to handle this? And ask. Experience is the best teacher. How would Miss Jones respond if we do this? How would Mr. So-and-so, if we respond, do that? We do it with students all the time. There's certain students that can get upset easily in certain areas. And so you want to make sure that you understand where they're coming from so you don't put them in a situation that's going to be detrimental to them. And no one, you never would want to approach a dire situation in public. You want to bring that teacher or that student on the side. But again, a lot of times working with those teachers, talking to the principals, bouncing ideas off of each other. Once you formulate your plan, you build that consensus, and then you move forward. So, hope that answers your question. I'm still trying to look at the clock and go as fast as I can, Mr. Glass. So.
How are we doing, Lisa?
6:33. You said an hour and a half. I've already lost it, sorry.
We're
Yeah, we're good.
We're good. You're doing fine. Number 11, I believe, is Mike.
In a hypothetical classroom where a concept has been taught and 1/3 of the students have not grasped the concept, 1/3 of the students have partially grasped the concept, and 1/3 of the students have mastered the concept, what are your expectations about how to manage the pace of teaching and learning in this classroom?
Well, everybody, learns differently. That's the first thing. I went to a pre-K meeting one time or a conference, and they said, when does a child learn to walk? When they're ready. When does a child learn to talk? When they're ready. When does a child learn to be potty trained? When they're ready. When does a child go to school? 5. We're going to go to school at 5. So, but when you get there, not everyone is on the same level. So as you work with the elementary teachers have been doing this for years, called differentiated instruction. You're working with a group here at this level, a group here at this level, and a group here at this level. Where you have to do is make sure you're moving that to the middle and high school as well. Coaches get it. Again, I go back to my example. You're not going to have a quarterback doing something on the defensive side unless they play that. You're working, if it's a running back, you're working on what? Catching drills, you're working on how you form, handoff, things like that, footwork, upper body strength, things like that. You're not going to do that for every single person on that particular squad. So when you do that, when you make those decisions, you look at that, you say, okay, these children, and there's several ways to look at it. Obviously, I'm sure you have pacing guides, so you have a general idea. But as I said earlier, with the college career standards, you have an opportunity to kind of go a little bit deeper. So with those students that already have it, it gives you an opportunity to either reinforce it through helping those that partially have it, or a service learning project that they can work on. Then that teacher can actually work with that smaller group and try to bring them up to where they're at. But the issue is you have to address it. And that's why elementary teachers have been doing it for years, because if you don't address it, what happens, that gap gets wider and wider and wider. And then you have the issue at the high school. So we never had this in elementary school. Well, we didn't, because, they work, elementary teachers do a wonderful job. Secondary teachers do as well. It's just that they're more with their subjects, whereas elementary teachers are more kind of spread out, and they work with a lot of different learning styles. And that's where we need to focus on that is, how can we help that 1/3 bring those up? And you have different ways. And of course, with Jacksonville State, you have so many opportunities with your students that want to be teachers, bringing them in, assisting with them, helping them in their practicums and clinicals, to actually have an opportunity to work one-on-one or small group, and to get that focus. So as you bring those 1/3 up and hopefully move those up, you don't want to just be stagnant and say, okay, 1/3 you got to just sit there. No, you want to challenge them as well. You want them to rise to the highest level each of that group can rise to.
So with those expectations, how would you ensure that they're met?
Sure. Well, again, that principal and that leadership team and those instructional coaches will look through that and say, okay, where are we? And again, you do that formatively all through the certain time frame, just like anything else. At the end of each class, I would sit there and say, okay, I would have some type of exit slip, okay? And I could look and see, and I did this a long time before we had all the technology. I would get our ag person when somebody would get a new whiteboard, and I'd say, oh, come here, give me the whiteboard. And I would cut it up, and I would have the little markers, and I would say, okay, you just do a quick formative assessment. You give a problem, and you say, okay, everybody stick it up. You got it, you need a little bit of help, y'all need some big time help. Okay, I'm gonna get y'all out later. And so that's how you do it in the classroom. You work with that principal, you work with those instructional coaches to help that teacher improve, help that teacher understand how to do it, because sometimes they just don't know how to do it. Sometimes they don't have the time to do it. And that's where you have to make that time, whether it's another class, whether it's reinforcing. And every once in a while you'll have a group that's really low, and you might have an additional class of math. That you might actually put additional class of math because they need some additional math skills in order to get them up to where they need to be. And you look at those things on each year, and again, we teach teaching on a case-by-case basis, and then you talk to teachers. And that's so important is, that planning time is you talk to those teachers periodically and say, how's it going? What problems are you having? Are I'm having a problem with Johnny. I'm having a problem with Susie. Okay, well, what's the problem? How can I help you with that? And they want to help kids. Sometimes they just don't know how to reach them. So that's how I would do it. You're all working together with those leadership teams and with those individual teachers collaboratively to move forward.
Thank you.
Okay, any follow-up to 11?
I'm just going to ask a question on the leadership teams you're talking about.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you establish those?
Well, I work, with the principal and say, your instructional coach, obviously, it could be a counselor, because there's a segment there, you need to understand where that child's coming from. One time I was, one of the best things that happened to me is I was real tough on a kid. He didn't have his homework. By golly, we're going to homework in my class. I don't give up 3 or 4 problems, but I want that homework done. And I was pretty tough on the kid. The counselor said, at that time it was Mr. Mack, Coach Mack, said, "Hey, Coach Mack, get in the car with me." Okay. I went to go see where the kid lived. He didn't have running water. Mama was dead. His daddy didn't know who his daddy was. He was living with his stepdad, who didn't have legs. He was worried, and he was washing his washing clothes out in the creek. Coming to school, you think he's worried about his homework? No. Did I have a different viewpoint? So that counselor is so important to bring those, understand where that child's coming from. Now, they still got to do their work, but how can I do this a different way? Well, I work with him on the side. Hey, let's get this work done before. Hey, come on, you and me, we're going to sit down and work right now. Let's get this thing done. Made all the difference in the world. But also your counselor, you also talk with certain your lead teachers, your master teachers, I would call them, the ones that have done it a long time and are very good. And that's the committee or the kind of leadership team I would choose, or your quality assurance team, whatever you want to call it, QAT team. And you can keep those for a while. You can rotate those in and out, but you work, with your principal and the superintendent and your leadership. Hey, I want off. I want to do this for a few years because you're not looking at your data. You're trying to look at the school's data or your grade level's data, and that's quite a responsibility to ask. And a lot of people are quick to happen, and then some people need a little bit of encouragement. But yes, ma'am, that's how I would choose, or recommend to be chosen. Yes, Judge.
Okay, Emily, I think you have number 12.
Okay. As the face of a school system, a superintendent's charged with working collaboratively with faculty, staff, students, parents, community members, and business leaders alike in varied capacities. Describe a situation where you've worked with people who have strong differences of opinion.
One is we had a tax renewal, and it was the 30-year tax renewal. So we went we went with every type of group we could to speak to, talk to them, and we had a lot of people that said it's a tax increase, and we're like, well, no, it's a 30-year tax renewal. We have we had 17 mills, and we're renewing 17 mills. No, that's ending, and so you had a lot of discussions and with different people, a lot of different viewpoints to explain that, and we worked very hard on that, and we passed it with over 90% approval. But it took a lot of preparation and a lot of time just sitting down, talking to people, small groups, civic groups, city councils, because we had a big system, big county, and you had three different city councils you were dealing with there. So, but we were very successful. So that would be one way. Another way is anytime that there's a situation you're determining a teacher or a coach, for dismissal or for tenure. Those are always very tough situations. You get a lot of different viewpoints, and the main thing is you listen to them and you ask them, their opinion. And I know he's not, I know Coach so and so hadn't won too many games, but this is what he does for kids. And again, you have to make that determination in 3 years how they're going to be for 25. And so that's a tough decision sometimes. And then afterwards, there's a lot of times you can't explain why you let them go. You can say that we had to go in a different direction. But what you always want to try to do is what's best for children. But that would be 2 examples.
In any instance you've had with that, would you have done anything differently?
Anything differently? No, not really. I mean, I would have liked 100% on the tax renewal, but there's some people you just, they're just going to vote against that no matter what. And then of course anything else, I always, not anymore. I always try to be as compassionate as I can with people, because a lot of times they're related to people, or there's they have a tie or connection, church or something like that, And so that's very, very tough for people when you have to make those tough calls. So, but I always try to be compassionate, but no difference in that. So, but the other one, try to get 100%.
Thanks.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, number 13. As school board members, we are charged with making sure of three things. That number one, there's a clear vision for the system. Number two, resources are allocated to achieve the vision. And number three, there is accountability where it is clear if goals were achieved. How would you address vision, resources, and accountability in a system that has high standards, high expectations, and high achievers? And how would you respond to a system that expects top 5 results?
Well, I guess I'll try to address that maybe in reverse. Start off with, why wouldn't you expect top 5? I mean, that should, why wouldn't you? I mean, you take the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Auburns, whoever, they want to be in the top 4. They want to make that college playoff. You know, so that's how they're graded every year. So obviously, you want to be the best at what you do. And so you should expect that. So from that standpoint, that should always be your goal. So why wouldn't Jackson want to be in the top 5? I mean, that would be my question. But it goes back, I would think, to those 6 P's success I mentioned. That prior proper preparation prevents poor performance. That planning is so crucial. The planning side of it in order to implement. And you know, as you work with your vision, you have to share it for the system, and you hope that you reach as many people as you possibly can, understanding on here's our vision and here's where we want to go. And then along the way, as you evaluate that, just like with anything else, you punt on your first series, it doesn't mean you change plans. Sometimes the second series, you punt. Well, if you look last Saturday, the third series was it worked out well for a particular team after a third and fourth and fifth and sixth series, but they were consistent in what they planned on doing. So you make sure that you move along the way, but you're constantly evaluating to make sure that by halftime, where are we? Middle of the year, okay, here's where we said we're going to be. Here's where we are projected to be. Are we on a path for success? And if not, what corrections do we need to make in order to get there? And then finally, at the end, as you evaluate, you share those results. Hey, we did great at this, we did great at that, but we need to work on this, and we need to work on that. And if you're honest with people, I've never had if you own up to things, hey, I didn't get that done, but we did this, this, and this. But our goal for this year is going to make sure that we address that even more so. And people, as long as they're included, as long as they feel like they have a stake and they have a an ear, you're going to be able to continue to move forward. So, but you're always constantly evaluating. Are we doing the right thing? And as you move forward at the end result, then you go back and you look summatively. Did we accomplish what we asked to accomplish?
Okay, any follow-up? All right. Number 14, Kelly.
With funding tight, teachers, administrators, and support staff have taken on more and more responsibilities. What would you do to keep them encouraged and their morale up?
Well, first thing I do is if we accomplish something, celebrate it. Celebrate your successes. It doesn't take a lot of money to celebrate something. Pat yourself on the back. If something positive happens, recognize it. Simple as that. I mean, you do that for people that get a college scholarship. Okay, well, it should be the same. If a teacher just got their PhD, recognize it. Hey, put it out to the faculty, put it out to the staff. Recognize it at a board meeting. Hey, you've got somebody here that just got their doctorate. Congratulations. That's a lot of hard work. Or a particular, they've reached a certain level at a, particular with an academic success. Bring them before the board. Recognize them. Not only the students love it, but the parents do as well, and it takes pride. And then they go back and they work harder to do it again. So celebrate it.
All right, there's a second part.
Yes, ma'am.
Regarding teacher recruitment, what is your definition of a highly effective teacher, and how would you recruit teachers that fit this description to our system?
Well, the first thing is you want to be a teacher. I would say a highly effective teacher is a teacher that reaches his or her students and moves everyone up, moves everyone to that next level. Again, I'll say it again, a highly effective teacher is one that looks at every single student and at the end of that particular school year has moved that student from where they started to a higher level. Now, you say, well, it's got to be this, it's got to be that. Well, I can carry you to students that if we can get them potty trained, and I just mean truthful, there's special needs students, that if you can accomplish those particular tasks, you want to jump for joy because you've done so much for that child. They can feed themselves, or they can do this, or they can do that. The other children, you say, how can I move them from here to here? They're struggling here, but they're excelling there. A teacher, those highly effective teachers are the ones that think outside the box, and they work with that student. They make that student feel so special and so individualized that they'll go through a brick wall for Dr. Sims. I mean, please don't be out today. Please don't be out today. That's the kind of teacher when I call highly effective. That you want to be in there. You don't want to leave their classroom. And when I go observations, they'll go, he stayed in my classroom a long time. Well, that means I enjoyed it. If I didn't want to leave, now I've also been in some classrooms after 5 seconds, I was dying. And if I'm dying, I know the kids have left it a long time ago. So we got to work on some student engagement strategies there. That's what I would classify a highly effective teacher. As far as recruiting, you got in your backyard. It's called Jackson State University. You have the opportunity of all schools to pick the creme de la creme, the top branch, and say, this is who I want, this is who I see. You talk to those instructors, you talk to those professors, you talk to those people that have been the students have been in the classrooms, and you single, so this is somebody that I like in this position. This is somebody that I want to go after. And you go after them, because you should be able to have first dibs. You should have a great relationship with Jackson State University. That they're coming in all the time, and you're finding the ones, yes, yes, no, yes, yes. And that, to me, you've got that's your gem right there. That's your hidden gem, having them as a resource to have effective teachers. I would dare say that a majority, several of your teachers that are on your teaching now are Jackson State graduates. Is that correct? Yeah, and they're probably pretty good. Yep, that's who you want. That's who you. So that's how I would recruit. Obviously, you could do other things. You may have a particular subject that you need help in that maybe Jackson's not having anybody graduate. So you're going to go to some other fairs and job fairs and some scouts. But the main thing is if you can grow them in your backyard, grow them.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, number 15 is Steve.
Describe a school wellness program and what you know about implementing one.
Well, there's so many several over the years. I mean, you have the simple ones like Jump Rope for Heart, but you also have others that look at a wide range of things, because students, if they come to school and they're having issues, whether it be blood pressure, whether it be diabetes, whether it be overweight, if they're having issues, they're having to fight those issues before they can even tackle anything with education, with something learning. For me, example, when I was in first grade, they thought I had a learning problem until I got these thick Coca-Cola glass bottle glasses, and then I got to move to the new group. I couldn't read because I couldn't see. So, as you look at that, sometimes you have to take care of their health needs first. And there's wonderful examples, elementary. I mean, we can go into so many examples that that you can use where you can use the Xboxes and the Wiis, and kids are getting all this exercise and calisthenics and they didn't even realize it. So there's system-wide or grade-wide or school-wide that you can use. But it's so important to work with those nurses for the screenings, also for the students, because again, if they're healthy, then you're going to have a better chance. Growing up, we didn't have nurses. You either sucked it up and went through the day, or someone came and got you. And today, more and more is on the school systems, and the nurses play a vital role in that and that helps teachers with more instruction time. because the more instruction time they have, the better off that student has an opportunity to improve. So that's just some that I'm familiar with. I mean, you may have specifics here, but, but that's basically it. You're trying to look at that whole person in order to help them improve.
So do you have a wellness policy at the school you're at now?
Yes, yes, we do. All schools are required to have a wellness policy.
Okay.
Yes. Or all
You can describe your own wellness policy if you
Sure.
want to.
Well, we incorporate, everything from health class to there's issues that you deal with for students to look out for, students to be aware of. Then you have PE classes where they, of course, you're trying to do like 60 minutes a week of having some type of strenuous or activity for the heart and for conditioning. And it's permeated throughout the whole school. The health curriculum is taught throughout the whole school from that standpoint, especially at the elementary level. But that's pretty much what we'd examine. We bring in the school nurses. Occasionally, we also have we'd have the dental clinics that would come in and work with students on a particular basis. And also, we work with the Lions Club. They did a wonderful job when we needed students that needed help with classes like that.
How often do y'all have wellness committee meetings?
Wellness committee meetings, we usually had them about once a quarter. We usually have them like the beginning of the year, we'd have them the end of the 9 weeks, like the end of the year, Christmas, and it's about 3 or 4 times a year. And it was coordinated with our nurses. They worked very closely, and then they would, of course, from there, work with the coaches, the PE coaches a lot of times that would do a lot of that. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other questions on that? Number 16, Mike?
As you're probably aware, we don't have a middle school in our system, which means 7th and 8th grade students are at the high school. Given our limited facilities in this area, to what extent would you separate middle school age students from the high school students, and why?
As much as possible. We don't have any small children here, do we? Okay. I found out that there was no Santa Claus on the school bus. Who was it? It was an older kid. Okay. So the more that you can keep those middle school students away from those high school students, because obviously nowadays middle school students are a lot more astute to things than I was. I can promise you that. The things that you get asked sometimes nowadays in middle school will kind of make you blush a little bit. But at high school level, it's just great to keep them separate as much as possible. And obviously proximity, if you can keep them in certain areas, if you can arrange your classes so that they're on particular wings. Lunchroom times are separate, and there's a space between so they can be in and out if it's feasible, in and out, and so they're back where they need to be before the other groups come. Obviously 7th and 8th and 9th is not as bad as 7th and 12th graders. That's not a fair fight. I mean, they need that space. Perfect world, obviously, you would have a true middle school, but in a perfect world, everybody have all the money they need to. So you would keep them separate as much as possible. But also, it's very good for the teachers to be together, because then they can work together, whether it be lesson planning, or they can collaborate, they can have that camaraderie. A prime example on that is that one year I taught math, and I had a person close to me taught science, and I was doing, I think it was scientific notation. And one year the students they just got it. I was like, man, all right, we're moving on. The next year was like pulling teeth. And I'm like, well, what's the difference in this year and next year? And one day I just happened to be mentioned to I heard the science teacher say, man, these kids are killing me this year with scientific notation. Last year they got it. And I said, wait a minute, when did you teach scientific notation? Well, this time we figured out that the year that was tough for me was the year that I introduced it, and later on she brought it up, and it was just reinforced. The year and then the next year was vice versa. So we started working together on that and started teaching it side by side. And we try to do that as many science and math activities as we could. Introduce it here and then reinforce it there, and it worked very well together. So when you're in that type setting and you have similar periods off, you're able to collaborate and kind of work with those students. And also, hey, Johnny's having a problem today. If you had a problem, he's had an issue today. Let's watch out for him. So it helps when you're in that space, in that area. And also the safety factor as well. And again, as a parent, of one boy and 3 girls, I would much rather have my 7th grade daughter on one end than a 12th grade boy on the other. But that's just me.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
One thing I didn't say at the beginning is we are recording, and we will broadcast at the end of all the interviews,
Sure.
so it's not being broadcast tonight. So just to clarify, you did say that there was no Santa Claus on that bus, right?
On the bus, that is correct.
Right, just making
On the
sure
bus.
that I understood that.
I apologize, Mr. Glass. Thank you for correcting that egregious error of mine. And by the way, my children, they probably didn't hear that because they weren't listening. They're tired. But, you know, one time I asked them a question. They said, "Daddy, is there Santa Claus?" And I responded by this: "The day you stop believing is the day he stops coming," and they've always turned in their list to me each year.
Okay, number 17. What strategies would you employ to increase enrollment, and what are your thoughts on open enrollment?
Well, first off, if you want people to come, you have to do something different and better than what other people are doing. So you have to look and say, what is it that Jacksonville City is doing that other people aren't doing? Or what can we establish that would set the precedent that people would want to come here? So that's the first part. Now, you get the devil's in the details on that, but we don't have time for that. The second part about open enrollment is that I'm a proponent of it, but I think it needs to be a case-by-case basis. I think there needs to be a selection, criteria. Obviously, you don't want to take in a 3rd grade student if you're overloading 3rd grade. That would be common sense. However, if they're a good student, they don't have any issues, and they're good academically, or they're just a good kid, they don't have discipline issues, obviously. But why would you want to open up yourself to an issue if they've got several issues at other systems? Would you want them in your system if you don't have to take them? So the answer would be yes, but with a selection criteria.
Okay, any follow-up on that? All right, Emily, 18.
Okay. Providing all stakeholders with necessary and appropriate information regarding matters of the school system is critical. What are some examples of specific strategies you've used to promote public support of school activities, budgets, and instructional programs?
Meetings, but not just meetings, at the central office. Anybody that wants to come talk, wants to listen, I'm gonna go talk to them. I don't care if it's at the Kiwanis Club or the Lions Club. Or I'm gonna promote the positive things of this particular system. Also, if you ever have an opportunity for an open, a lot of times churches have some types of open things. Be visible. If you're visible, people will come up to you and they'll talk to you. I've never yet, and you know how shy. You can already tell I'm a shy person. People will come up to me. Social media. More and more today, people, if you post things on Facebook, on your website, an app that a lot of systems have apps where you can send out to every cell phone, hey, we just did this. Hey, obviously bad weather, or we've got to do this, or a delay, but also the football team won on last second field goal. Congratulations, guys. So and so just last was it Tuesday night. The volleyball team won a decisive 5th game against Oxford. Hey, congrats to the girls. Those little things like that, that's the way to get that out. Anytime you have an opportunity to tell your story and to be positive with it. But you can do all calls as well. But newspapers, anytime you have an opportunity to write letters to the editor, talk about, thanking people and here's what we've accomplished. I always give the media my phone number, my cell phone number. They can call me any damn day or night. Anything positive that they want to say, I am willing. They'll call me, hey, what you got going on? Let me tell you what we got going on. And here's what this 4th grade teacher's doing. And here's what this particular group just about to accomplish. They just got back from there. The more times you can talk about the positives, because you're going to have negatives. It's just a matter of time. You're dealing with students, you're dealing with teachers, you're dealing with people. You're going to have a boo-boo sometimes. You're going to have a problem sometimes. But you want to accentuate the positives. So that's how I would do that. And the second part is what was the second part again?
How would you ensure that various stakeholders are involved in this process?
You offer access, open door policy. You remove all barriers. They will, if I'm your superintendent, there will be no one who will say, well, I could not get him to call me back. You call me, I don't care if I may not want to talk to you, but, you know, because, I mean, I had a parent one time call me and said they were mad about a teacher. And I said, okay. I said, all right, what's the problem? And he said, he's worse than Hitler. I said, okay, stop you for a second. You understand Hitler killed about 6 million of his own people. You still want to stick with that statement? And I've only had one over the years say, yeah. Most of the time, well, they're not that bad. But you listen to them. You listen to them. And you call them back in that 24-hour window. And you post things on the Twitter. You post things on Facebook. You post things on the websites. You give them every opportunity to respond to you. Now, most of the time people don't do that. When do they do it? I bet you already know this. When they're not happy. They want something changed. That's the only time. And it's that silent majority, more times than not, that you don't hear things as you go, maybe we're doing it right there. Maybe we're doing it right there. So usually there's a handful that might not like it. But most people, they don't come up and say, good job. Most of the time they don't. But that's how I would do it. Open. Be transparent and open. My wife and kids will tell you, they've sat in the car a long time when somebody wants to talk to me. But if that mom or that daddy's upset, okay, now obviously if I can help them, I want them, if they call in the morning, I'm going to let them calm down, call back in the afternoon. But I'm going to call them back. Because most time people just want to be heard. And so thank you for listening to me. And if you'll make that change, I will. But if not, thank you for listening. And in some cases, you can help them. You can make a change. Sometimes you just say, I don't know if I can do that. I'm going to listen to you. And if you listen to them, most of the time they appreciate that. So open policy. Yes, ma'am.
Could you talk a little bit about the people-to-people international travel that
Sure.
I noticed in your, something that you did outside of school, I think?
Yes, sir. It was actually, we worked with it in the governor's office to begin with back in the 80s. And it's an international youth exchange program. Actually, this year I'm going to lead a delegation to, where am I going this year, Hannah Brooke? We're going to, we're going to France, we're going to Switzerland, we're going to Germany, we're going to Swiss Alps, Austria, and some places in Italy. But it's a social, cultural, and diplomatic program where you have homestays and then you stay in some hotels. But you actually, you're immersed in that particular culture. And the students, some people obviously can write it on a check. One of my daughters has traveled before, and we raise money. I've had sisters that travel, I've had nephews that travel. It broadens your horizons. And I get no money for it. I mean, I get to travel, I get reimbursed if I drive somewhere, but I get no money for it. But what it does is it opens up that there's more than in the world than Jacksonville. There's more in the world than Calhoun County, more in the world than North Alabama or the Southeast or the U.S. And it helps you relate to things. You know, you pay attention to something that you can relate to. And if you've never been there, it doesn't mean anything to you, then it's not that important. But after you've had the opportunity to travel and you see things and different things, and it broadens those horizons. And you help those students grow that way. And they come back, I can't tell you how many changed lives that you touch with that. And they've had the opportunity to later come back and they want to enroll in international business, or they want to enroll in something dealing with international work. And so it opens those doors, and it lets them know that there's more than out there than just that. And so that's separate, above and beyond. That's something I've worked with for several years, and it's been tremendous. I've been to every continent except Antarctica, and if I want to go to Antarctica or if I want to go see penguins, I'll go to the zoo. I have no desire to go to Antarctica, but it's been wonderful, and it helps you. I've taken tours of schools, and you see those particular things, and it kind of reinforces that so many people around the world are just like us. They want the very best for their kids, and they're doing it in the way they know how best. But thank you for asking about that.
Thank you. Number 19, Steve.
To what degree do you believe responsibilities can and should be delegated to principals, and provide examples of how you hold them accountable for accomplishing those responsibilities?
Sure. Well, just as the board will give me direction, these are the things we want you to accomplish. If you're superintendent, I'll do the exact same thing. I'm not a micromanager. I don't walk in and say, do this or do that. But we sit down and go back to my situational leadership, depending on what qualities or traits they have, we will have communications. Those principals are the instructional leaders of that school. Now, obviously, we're going to play a vital role. Being a smaller system, I'm going to be, a lot more involved in things. But day to day, if their faucet is not working, they don't need to call me. They need to call that principal or that assistant principal, and they'll get the custodian or get someone over there to work on it. They may call the central office for a purchase order, but that's, that particular chain of command. But I'm going to work with those individual principals to make sure that, you set expectations, and it's not, as the old saying goes, not what you expect, it's what you inspect. And you're sitting down on every teacher and say, okay, how is Miss So-and-so doing? We were working on this with her. We have periodic checks, and how can we improve? Well, is she improving? Do we need to look at different type of professional development? Do we need to pair her with somebody else? Does he or she need to see somebody else do this? And as you move through the list, you're constantly looking at that. And again, I set clear expectations. I want a clean environment. I want it spotless. I want it to look great. I want the public, when they see them, to go, wow. You have to spend millions of dollars to put some paint on the walls and some elbow grease. And you want to take pride in that. And you also, not only you still with your principals, but your teachers and your students. You're going to see me, if I'm your superintendent, I'll walk by and pick up that piece of paper. And I hope if I'm walking down the hall and a principal sees a piece of paper, I want him or her to reach down and pick it up before I get it. So as you work with them, you're going to be working with those principals, and they're going to be working with their leadership teams, and I'll be a part of that, but not every day. But day to day, those teachers will report to those administrators. If they're ever out, hey, I'm there. I'll step in and do whatever I can. I'll do whatever. But here's the way I look at it. If you hire me, you're going to hire me, and you're going to pay me as a superintendent. You're not going to hire me to be the superintendent. Well, you might. If you want to pay me enough to be the principal too, I'll take that. But I don't think you're going to do that. So if that's the case, whoever we hire, I want them to be the principal. And we work together. Now, I will say this. I have an old adage is that ask for permission rather than forgiveness. So if you're going to go on a limb, you better want to call me first, because I'll give you one freebie, and after that I'll saw it off. The limb, that is. So that's how we kind of work with that. If you got an issue you think it may come to me, pick up the phone, call me. And I'm not, if I call and say, hey, what happens with this? I'm not going to jump on you. Hey, what happened? I got a parent that's upset. Tell me the story. Tell me what's going on. Tell me how I'm going to call this person back because they call me, but give me the details. And I'm always going to try to refer it back to the lowest committee, the smallest committee possible. If that parent has an issue with a teacher, they need to first start with that teacher. Don't involve me. Hey, listen, here's what I want you to do for me. You go back to that teacher. Well, that teacher, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, then let's get the assistant principal in there. All right? Let's sit down. Let's see if we can work this out. Because if we can work this out right here, it doesn't need to go anywhere else. If you get that phone call, I want you to pick up the phone call. Hey, Dr. Mack, so-and-so called me on this. Will you check into that? Got it. I'm going to go take care of that, get with that principal. That principal get with that teacher, or get with that. Same with the coach. I'm an old coach. Don't talk to coaches after a ball game. They're fired up. They've worked hard. They've lost or they won. And I know you never heard this. My child doesn't get enough playing time. Okay, and here's why I want that. What can my child do, or how can I help my child improve to help the team? Okay, and so, but set that time with that coach the next day. After that's cool down period, and work with those individuals. And if it doesn't work, then bring in the administrator. If that doesn't work, bring in to me. And then if you're not happy, then come before the board. But if we go through that chain of command, 98% of the time I found out, the issue gets handled, and you have to deal with it. There's always going to be a handful of times that no matter what, they're going to come talk to you. And that's fine. But if you go through that chain of command, you take care of most of those issues. So that's how we kind of handle that. Clear, defined roles. This is what I expect. I'm going to inspect those things.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I had one follow-up to that. What's the biggest difference between managing an elementary school principal versus a high school principal?
Well, elementary usually are a lot more detailed, and sometimes elementary will, if you say, hey, we need to work on this, they can really, you feel like you're getting on to them. It's not that, it's, hey, it's here, here's just something I see that we can improve on. Sometimes high school, administrators, their big picture, and they're, hey, well, we need to come down to the individual here, I've seen a lot of people be a phenomenal administrator, but they don't work well with people, or they don't work well with, public. And so you want to work with that professional development to help that person along the way. So I hope it answers your question there, but that's kind of what we do there.
Okay, Ms. Kelly, our favorite question again. Number 20.
Last but not least, we have 6 quality finalists for this position. Why should the board select you?
Okay. Well, first off, I want to thank you for the opportunity. I think the School Board Association did an excellent job in picking the top 6. And thank them, and also thank you for having me here tonight. So I will tell you this, first and foremost, I don't know the others, anything like that, but I'm a big proponent. If I'm your superintendent, my school-age children will go here, because you have to be all in. And so one of the things that I will do, and as I've done in my other system, is that I worked, even harder than I could ever imagine, because I wanted what was best not only for every child, but mine as well. And you say, well, what happens when your children graduate? Well, then you're trying to maintain that. You're trying to make sure you maintain that level of excellence. So as you do that, I'm proud to say that I was the superintendent of Coffee County 4.5 years. I'm proud to say I was federal program director for Colvin County for 8 years. I'm proud to say I was a teacher, and coach, and I'm proud of my past accomplishments, and so I take ownership. One of the things that would separate me is that I'm the only candidate that has successful experience as a superintendent in Alabama. So there's not a learning curve with the rules and regs and the policies and procedures. The State Department personnel, I'll be able to hit the ground running when it comes to that. And one thing that I do is I listen to people. I listen. A lot of times I listen a lot more than I talk. I know you say, well, it's 7 to 16. I don't really believe that, Dr. McPherson. But it's true. I listen. And I ask people's opinions. And then we sit down and formulate a plan together, and then we move forward with that. I truly believe that an educator, if you're really truly an educator, it's a calling. And I would say it's only second to being called as a pastor. I would say first, by far, by God, being called or set aside as a pastor. But I truly believe you're a true educator, true teacher that loves children. It's a calling. And I'm passionate about everything I do. I want the very best. I want it to be the very best it can. Now, it may not always be. I'm not perfect. But I'm going to put everything I have into being the best, or having us be the best. Now, let me tell you a story. And this involves, this is how I feel about all children. Our oldest daughter, at 18 months, we found out that something was wrong. And I get emotional, so please bear with me. She stopped making eye contact. She clothes hurt her, wouldn't pay attention, walked on her tippy toes, was withdrawn. And me, as an educator, I knew there was something wrong. So at 2 years old, we went and we had her evaluated. And 2 years old, they told us, they said, "Sir, your child is autistic. And if she continues with these tendencies, she's going to be institutionalized the rest of her life." Now, I don't know about you. It devastated my wife and me. When you think of your child, you think of your child's being, winning the Nobel Peace Prize, right? Or winning this or winning that, or doing great things. But when they tell you at 2 years old that your child's probably going to be institutionalized, that night I always bought the groceries. My wife buys pots and pans and nicks and knacks. I buy food, so I buy the groceries. Yeah, she'll get me for that when we get home. But as I was buying groceries, I was absolutely devastated. You know, I really was. And as I was marking off something, my pen falls out of my hand. As I go to reach that pen up, and the Lord works in mysterious ways. Now, I believe in God, and we believe in Jesus Christ, and we go to church on a regular basis. As I reach down to pick up that pen, a little girl picks it up for me. She goes, "Here you go, mister. You dropped your pen." I said, "Well, thank you, young lady. Thank you so much." That little girl only had one arm. And right there and then, I said, "Thank you, God." And so from that moment on, I worked, and we worked, and not just us, but our teachers, the support staffs at the schools. We worked, and we worked, and we worked probably more times. I mean, I can tell you stories, you know, of how you would bang your head against the wall and she not understanding things, and, you know, funny things like, you know, "Rebecca, he's pulling your leg." "He did not touch my leg at all." "Well, no, he didn't touch," you know, okay, we'll work on idioms later. But, you know, all these things. But this past May, she walked across the graduation stage in an advanced diploma in ninth year class. I care about every single child. If I'm your superintendent, I care about every single child. We had 95% graduation rates in Coffee County. I would still tell teachers, if we go down to the kindergarten class and we got 100 kids, pick out the 5 and tell them who to go home. Go pick out your 5 and tell them to go home now. 95% is not good enough. I want 100%. And that's what we want to strive to do. Every single thing that you do, you want to do the very best you can do. And that's what I will give you. I'll be tireless, I'll be unrelentless, and I will be an advocate for education. And I'll be passionate in everything I do. Now, I may make a mistake, but if I'm going to make a mistake, I'm going to fall down, I'm going to skin my nose, not my backside. That's why I want to be your superintendent, and that's why I think you should choose me. But thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
Oh, wait, I got one more part.
Oh, sorry.
Don't want to leave you out. As superintendent, how important would it be for you to live in Jacksonville?
I'm all in. I mean, if they need to see me at the grocery store in my ugly shorts and Walmart or wherever else, or out eating and things like that, and if it's important enough for them to talk to them right there and then, I will. If not, hey, here's my card, call me Monday morning or call me tomorrow and I'll sit down with you and we'll have a Coke and a smile and help you. So I think it's very important to be a part of the community, to be a part of clubs and activities, because again, that's all about promoting not just Jacksonville, the school system, but Jacksonville, the community, the city, and county. Thank you.
Thank you.
At the end, we always ask you if you have a question for us. Is there anything that you'd like to say other than what you've already said?
No, sir, I think that's all. I had an opportunity to talk to Mr. Poe a little bit. I've talked quite extensively with Mr. Neighbors. I think he's done an excellent job for you in the interim. And so I think I have most questions answered. I do my 6P success. I've already done my prior proper preparation. So I feel like we're going to have some productive outcomes.
Well, that concludes the interview. Our timeline for making a decision is October the 19th. We've set a board meeting for that day. And we'll be calling references, and if you have any questions about that, let us know.
Well, here's the thing. I do what's right for children, and I say that because every time I make a decision, would I do this if my child's in that classroom? Would I do this if my child's in that school? Now, when you do that, you do the right thing for kids. That doesn't always equate to doing the right thing for people, for adults. So sometimes, as you know, y'all made some tough decisions. That doesn't always equate with, hey, I like him. But what I hope people would say is, if they don't like me, they respect me for the decision I made. They may not agree with it, but so yeah, the people I put you on there, yeah, they're going to say good things about me. But the people you're going to call that I don't have on the list, you're not always going to get the right answer. But I'm going to tell you what I've always done. I've done what's right for kids.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
We appreciate your interest in the position. We're very excited. And if everyone would just give us a hand for Dr. Don McPherson.